All right, guys, we're going to look at an inconsistent rhetorical analysis essay today. And I'm going to talk about how this writer has all the elements to their answer there, but they need to work on their arrangement a little bit and their specificity, most importantly, and kind of their approach too. But before we started to look at the actual sample itself, I wanted to go over the general body paragraph strategy we've been talking about using this WPAE approach, where after the topic sentence or you introduce a paragraph with an opening statement, you get into delivering evidence. You write the quote either by embedding quotes or paraphrasing or a mixture of the two. You generally want to present that evidence and put some context into it. For the situation, right? How does this relate to the other parts of the piece of writing or speech that you're looking at? How does it relate to the moment with the audience or the speaker? Get it put in place and have the context put in there too, so that the reader that is trying to understand what you're saying can understand and follow along with your point. And then the other part that a lot of people miss is the analyze and evaluate. That would be the commentary portion of a body paragraph. You need to show function of the thing you're analyzing. You need to explain how it works. You need to look at the cause and the effect of the device and the appeal. How does it fit into the bigger strategy? Don't just tell us that it fits into the strategy or say that it's effective. Explain why. Because this, most likely this. Okay, create some kind of cause-effect explanation. And then finally, before you just drop your point and move on to the next one, you want to try to fit it into that bigger picture, connect it back to that speaker or writer's overall purpose in that moment with that audience. How does this fit into their general strategy of what they're trying to do? And that's called evaluating. And so we're going to, excuse me, we're going to look at this sample here, 2B, if you're downloading the file from our Canvas page. This is the inconsistent response. And so there's parts of this response that are fine. I don't think overall I disagree with the point that this writer has seen in Kennedy's speech. We're looking at Kennedy's speech to steelworkers in 1962. I don't disagree with this author's points, but the delivery of the points in their essays is what needs some work. And so let's just look at the introduction here and kind of look at their thesis. After the price increase of steel in 1962, John F. Kennedy had a very powerful response. In his speech made on April 11, 1962, Kennedy is extremely effective in his use of rhetorical strategies to convey his message. Okay? They haven't really said very much so far. I mean, it serves as an introduction, so it's fine. No big deal, but I'm hoping, as a reader, I'm hoping that they get to a point sometime soon. Kennedy employs a disapproving tone and strong diction in order to clearly achieve his goal in making the steel companies reverse the increase. So they did a good job of capturing the goal. Kennedy wants to make the steel companies reverse their increase. They pulled that out of the speech just fine. Yes, Kennedy does have a disapproving tone, and yes, some of Kennedy's word choice is strong. But the problem with this approach that I have is that it's going to create a limited response ultimately, because you can't say that people were motivated purely by Kennedy's choice of words or purely by his tone. I think this writer could have done a better job if they had focused on an appeal first, like Kennedy created a sense of guilt or a sense of moral obligation or something like that. Then you can use the disapproving tone or the strong word choice in how you analyze that overall appeal. But just focusing on the micro level, surface features is a lot of times going to lead to an inconsistent or a very limited essay, because other than just simply pointing out that Kennedy has the tone or Kennedy chose his words strongly, there's not really much else to say if this is all you're trying to prove. Okay, so the first body paragraph here is going to focus on the tone. Kennedy's tone parallels that of a father. For example, if the eldest brother, big and strong, beat up the youngest brother for no reason at all, the father would use a tone similar to Kennedy's. I kind of get what they're saying in terms of like the parental disapproval. The problem that I have with this as a topic sentence is that they're distracting from what they're supposed to be analyzing, which is the speech. This is a hypothetical explanation or analysis, which could be useful perhaps in the paragraph, but not as the topic sentence of the paragraph. This is the part where they need to introduce the idea and transition into evidence from Kennedy's speech, instead of just telling me that Kennedy has a tone and that he sounds like a father. They're kind of summarizing what they thought about the speech instead of really analyzing it. Let's see. Father would emphasize the innocence of the younger brother, the American people, and how he could not defend himself. The American people couldn't handle the increase because of the recession. This sentence seems completely out of place. They've been telling me this hypothetical father, brother, older brother, younger brother metaphor. And then I don't know where they try to throw it back in the context of the recession in 1962. And it's vague and distracting. And so I think this sentence either needs to be much higher to set context to that situation first, or if they are going to lead into this, kind of weird metaphorical distraction, they need to strike the sentence entirely, because it's jarring. However, Kennedy, by using this tone, wants to make the steel companies feel guilty for what they have done to the pure and innocent younger brother. Okay? Again, I think that they've carried this metaphor on way too long. I don't think it would have been very hard for them to just speak in terms of the American people, Kennedy, and the steel tycoons, rather than creating this like Kennedy is the father, the American people is the younger brother, and the steel tycoons are the abusive older brother. Like, it's distraction. It's a distraction, and it really kind of muddles their point. And so they're spending a lot more time analyzing their own metaphor instead of Kennedy's speech. I do agree that Kennedy is trying to make the steel, tycoons, the leaders in the steel industry, feel guilty about, raising prices during a time of recession and hardship. I definitely agree there. But their delivery of this idea it just needs a lot of restructuring. We finally do get some evidence from Kennedy's speech, but look at all the analysis that's already happened, and this is way out of order. To conclude his speech, Kennedy says, "Some time ago, I asked each American to consider what he would do for his country, and asked the steel companies. In the last 24 hours, we had their answer." Okay. So what this evidence should do is it should give the writer an opportunity to explain Kennedy's disapproving tone. Okay? Because if you go back all the way up to the top of this paragraph, that's what they talk about. They say this paragraph is supposed to be about Kennedy's tone. And they've told me what tone they say Kennedy had. And they've finally given me some evidence of Kennedy speaking. So this should be a good opportunity for us to see that tone if this is going to be effective evidence. Okay? And now what effective commentary would look like after a quote like this is the writer would explain how this sentence creates that disapproving tone. But instead what we get is the tone of these two sentences is so powerful. Okay? Again, I don't know if they're just clutching or they're not really sure what's going on. I don't disagree that maybe that's a powerful line. but I don't see how that creates a disapproving, fatherly, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed tone. They try to say here, it isn't anger, but it is so disapproving. Kennedy conveys his disappointment in the steel companies, which, as any child knows, is much worse than anger. It leads to feelings of guilt, which was Kennedy's goal. Okay? And so, yeah, I think Kennedy is trying to make them feel guilty, but I don't think he's just trying to make them feel guilty. Okay? He's not just sending the steel tycoons to their bedrooms. He's making them feel guilty and accountable to the American people so that they will enact change in their business practice. Okay? And so that's a detail that needs to be here at the end of the paragraph, because that's the whole point. If Kennedy wants the steel companies to lower steel prices, then this guilt has to function in some way to get them to do that. And this writer never really comes back and touches on any of that. They really spend more time in this paragraph analyzing their own far-fetched metaphor than they do Kennedy's language. The second paragraph is a little bit rushed and I think a lot more simple, primarily because they try to focus on Kennedy's word choice. There's just not really much to say about that when you focus an entire paragraph on word choice by itself. There's not really much to say because all authors choose their words. So Kennedy's well-chosen diction also contributes to the effectiveness of his speech. The diction helps create the disapproving tone. In the introduction, Kennedy states, the American people will find it hard, as I do, to accept a situation in which a tiny handful of steel executives whose pursuit of private power and profit exceeds their sense of public responsibility can show utter contempt for the interests of 185 million Americans. So we're supposed to be looking at well-chosen diction, right? Which is word choice. Yet the evidence we're presented with is this big, old, long sentence. It's like 6 or 7 lines long here. Okay? Which word, or specifically chosen word out of this sentence, is the one that creates the power? Because they're saying that because he chose his words well, his speech was effective. So which word in this piece of evidence is the one that people heard and were just suddenly convinced by? Okay? And that's the inherent flaw with focusing on diction at front, is that you cannot just simply convince someone to do something because they hear a specific trigger word, okay, in most situations. And so this quote, I don't like referring to the quote like that, like meta in the paper. Kennedy's not using the quote. We're quoting Kennedy. Now, if Kennedy is quoting somebody else, like Abraham Lincoln or something like that, then Kennedy would be using the quote. But he's not. In fact, Kennedy, in this speech, the only person he alludes to is himself from his own inaugural address. So it is packed with exceptional word choice. I agree there, but they haven't really identified very much. They say utter contempt and tiny handful. And so, yeah, that's strong words, but at the same time, it's like, how are those words, this person needs to explain to me how Kennedy standing up there and saying utter contempt and tiny handful is going to make these steel executives change their business practices. Okay? There's no boardroom where a steel tycoon is saying to their chief executives and underlings, we need to roll back our, steel prices because Kennedy said that he feels utter contempt for us or something like that. That's silly. Okay? It's not the word choice by itself. Now, does this word choice help build that appeal for guilt and that sense of duty? Absolutely. So if you focus on that, you can make a really good point with this. But you have to focus on the appeal and then use the diction to explain how that appeal was created. Not just focus on the diction and say, because diction, therefore effective. So I think comparison was pretty smart here too. This paragraph is okay, and then they have this little tacked on conclusion at the end. But this second paragraph, big issue with that I see is that their points aren't really linked; they're just kind of listed. It's sort of like piece of evidence, and then it says like this quote shows, piece of evidence, this shows, piece of evidence, this shows, and they're just sort of telling me what to think about it instead of going through those WPAE steps in order and helping me see it through their explanation.